Japan. The world sees it in motion. Neon reflections stretching across rain-soaked streets. Trains that arrive to the second. Crowds flowing like currents through Shinjuku. A country that feels faster than the future itself. But that image is incomplete. Beyond the glass and steel and light, there is another Japan, a quieter one. A country where 70% of the land is still mountains, where forests outnumber cities, where entire communities exist, untouched by urgency. There are places here with no signals, no noise, no rush. Places even most people in Japan will never see. Tonight, we leave the cities behind. We follow old roads into deep forests, across forgotten islands, and into villages where time moves differently. This is not the Japan you know. This is the Silent Kingdom. Shirakawa-go. Hidden deep in the Japanese Alps, there is a village built against the impossible. At first glance, it feels peaceful, almost delicate. But nothing here was built for beauty. Everything was built to survive. In winter, this valley disappears. Snow doesn't fall here, it engulfs, up to 4 meters in a single night. Roofs collapse, roads vanish, the outside world ceases to exist. And yet, these houses remain. Their steep, triangular roofs, angled like hands pressed together in prayer. Gasho Zukuri, a design not of style, but necessity. The snow slides off before it can crush what lies beneath. Inside, there are no nails, only wood and rope woven from grass, flexible, so when the earth moves, the house moves with it. For generations, families lived together here. Above them, attics filled with silkworms. Below them, fires that never truly went out. Winter was not a season, it was a test of patience, of endurance, of community. Because in a place like this, survival was never individual, it was shared. Fushimi Inari. Most people see it in daylight. Crowded, bright, constant movement. A path filled with voices, cameras, footsteps that never pause. But at night, everything changes. The gates remain, but the people disappear. Thousands of tori stretching into darkness, endless, repeating. A tunnel of red, slowly dissolving into shadow. The deeper you go, the less the outside world follows. Sound fades first, then distance, then direction. Footsteps begin to echo, differently, not louder, closer, as if the space itself is listening. The air becomes still, not empty, held, and the path no longer feels like it is leading you somewhere. It feels like it is removing something, layer by layer. Noise, distraction, expectation, until there is almost nothing left except movement and awareness. And for a moment, you are no longer walking through the gates. You are walking through something internal. A space that does not exist on any map. Fushimi Inari does not guide you forward. It draws you inward. Yakushima. Far to the south, beyond the mainland, there is an island where time behaves differently. They say it rains 35 days a month. Not in storms, but constantly. And over centuries, that rain has built something extraordinary. A forest that feels alive. Not metaphorically, physically. Moss spreads across everything. Stone, wood, roots, even the air feels thick with it. Trees rise, impossibly tall, ancient cedar giants, some over 7,000 years old. They were already growing before the first civilizations began to write history, before pyramids, before empires. Time here does not pass. It accumulates, layers of life, on top of life, on top of life. The ground feels active. Roots stretch across the surface, like veins searching for something deeper. Animals move quietly. Deer watching without fear. Monkeys dissolving into mist. And the silence is not empty. It's dense. Heavy. As if the forest is aware and you are only passing through it. Arashiyama. In the outskirts of Kyoto, there is a place where the world changes texture. At first, it feels like a forest, but the moment you enter, it stops behaving like one. Bamboo rises everywhere, tall, straight, endless. Not growing in chaos, but in formation, like pillars in a cathedral built by nature itself. The density is overwhelming. There is almost no sky left to see, only thin fragments of light cutting through vertical green walls. And then the wind arrives. It does not move through the forest, it passes through it like memory. The bamboo responds instantly, not violently, but in sequence. One stalk bends, then another, then the entire grove follows, and the sound is not natural silence, it is structured. But Arashiyama does not end here. It opens. The forest releases you into something wider. The Katsura River appears slowly, as if it has been waiting just beyond the trees. In autumn, its surface carries color instead of light. Red, gold, fragments of the season, drifting across water that never holds them. The river does not resist what passes through it. It accepts and lets go. And as it moves, it begins to change. Further downstream, the stillness softens into motion. The same water, now flowing through the edge of the city. Structures, bridges, movement. And yet, it does not lose itself. It carries the forest with it, quietly. Upstream, the rhythm shifts again. Along the Hozugawa River, boats move through carved stone and water. Not fast, not slow, but guided. The current decides the path, and everything else follows. From above, it looks almost effortless. A line moving through space without resistance. Even the train, cutting through Arashiyama, does not interrupt the landscape. It passes through it like a brief thought, gone before it can settle. And when you rise above it all, the pattern becomes clear. Bamboo, river, movement, stillness, all part of the same structure. The forest does not end at the trees. It continues in another form. And somewhere within that flow, you begin to understand something subtle. That strength is not always found in standing still, and not always in moving forward. Sometimes it is found in knowing when to bend and when to flow. In the mountains of Wakayama, where the air holds more water than sound, there is movement, sudden, vertical, unstoppable. Nachi Falls. Water falls from impossible height, cutting through stone without hesitation. It does not slow down. It does not negotiate with gravity. It simply continues. a single line of force, breaking into mist before it reaches the earth. And beside it, not resistance, not control, a shrine. Kumano Nachi Taisha. Small, still, deliberate. Not built to compete, but to acknowledge. Here, nature is not framed, it is accepted. The sound of water fills everything. Not as noise, but as presence. Constant, unavoidable, a force that does not pause. Even when everything around it does. And yet, the shrine remains, unshaken. And in that contrast, something becomes clear. Balance is not the absence of force, it is the ability to exist beside it. Miyajima. There are places in Japan where the boundary between worlds begins to dissolve. At first, it feels simple. Water, wood, sky. But nothing here stays fixed. At high tide, the shrine detaches itself from the land. Structures rise from the surface, as if they were never meant to belong to the earth. And the gate stands alone in the water, balanced, silent, unmoving. It does not welcome you. It does not guide you. It simply exists between two states. But then, the tide begins to change. Slowly, almost invisibly, the water retreats. What once felt distant becomes reachable. The illusion breaks. You step forward onto ground that wasn't there before. You walk toward the gate, stand beneath it, touch it. And for a moment, it feels ordinary. Just wood, just structure. But then, the water returns. And just as quietly, everything separates again. The path disappears, distance is restored. And what you stood beneath becomes unreachable once more. Nothing here is permanent, not distance, not access, not even perspective. Miyajima does not hide its truth. It reveals it over time. That everything we think is solid is only temporary. Mount Fuji. For over 1,000 years, it has stood at the center of this land. Not because it is the tallest, not because it is the largest, but because it feels like something watching. Silent, perfectly still, unmoving, yet never absent. Most people see it only in passing, from a train window, moving at 300 kilometers an hour, a shape in the distance, gone before it can be understood. But Fuji was never meant to be seen in motion. It is meant to be witnessed in stillness. At its base, where the land softens into water, Lake Kawaguchi, Lake Yamanaka. Here, the world becomes reflective, not just visually, but emotionally. The surface of the lakes does not break the mountain. It repeats it, as if the earth itself is trying to remember its shape. The air feels different here, thinner, slower, and the wind does not rush, it lingers, like a presence moving through the space without revealing itself. Everything around Fuji behaves differently. Clouds gather around it, as if drawn back. Seasons do not pass over it, they frame it. In spring, it watches falling blossoms. In summer, it rises through clear silence. In autumn, it stands beyond burning color. In winter, it disappears into something almost unreal. Not changing, but revealing itself differently each time. And the closer you move toward it, the more it withdraws. Not physically, but in feeling. As if it refuses to be fully approached. a quiet reminder that some things are not meant to be reached, only observed, only understood from a distance. For centuries, people have climbed it, not to conquer it, but to disappear into it, step after step after step, through darkness, toward a horizon that does not promise anything. And when the final light arrives, there is no world left below, only cloud, only sky, only silence. And in that moment, it no longer feels like you are looking at Fuji. It feels like Fuji is looking back. Mount Fuji does not dominate Japan. It anchors it. A still presence that remains unchanged in a country that never stops moving. Ain. Along the northern coast, there is a village that doesn't sit beside the water, it sits on it. A line of wooden homes facing a perfectly calm bay. But these aren't just houses, they are part of the ocean. The ground floor holds boats. Not cars. The sea is not nearby, it is underneath. Daily life moves with the tide. Morning engines hum softly. Ropes knock gently against wood. Water reflects light onto ceilings, like moving glass. Upstairs, families live. Downstairs, the sea waits. These homes are not owned, they are passed down, from one generation to the next. A continuity that feels almost unbroken. Here, the boundary between human life and nature disappears. Jigokudani. Deep in the valleys of Nagano, there is a place known as the Valley of Hell. Not for fire, but for what rises from the earth. Steam. Thick. Constant. Breaking through frozen ground into air that barely moves. Winter here does not arrive gently. It settles in completely. Sound softens. Movement slows. Survival becomes visible. And within this stillness, there is life. Snow monkeys, macaques that have learned something the landscape does not offer freely: warmth. They descend from the forest, not in urgency, but with familiarity. They know where to go. The hot springs, water rising from beneath the earth, holding heat that the surface cannot keep. They enter slowly, sit, and remain. No struggle, no resistance, only stillness within warmth. Their movements are minimal, intentional, almost human. They watch, they rest, they exist without excess. And as you observe them, something shifts. The distance between observer and subject begins to fade. Because here, the difference does not matter. Cold is cold, and survival is not about control. It is about knowing when not to fight, not to escape, but to adapt. Jigokudani does not reveal something unusual. It reveals something fundamental, that even in the harshest conditions, life does not become stronger by resisting. It becomes stronger by understanding what the world is offering and accepting it. In the far north, Japan changes. The land opens, not gradually, but all at once. Space replaces density. Silence replaces sound. This is Hokkaido, and before it was Japan, it belonged to something older, the Ainu, a people shaped not by cities, but by the land itself. Rivers were not resources, they were lifelines. Forests were not scenery, they were presence. Animals were not separate, they were equal. Bears were not feared, They were spirits, messengers between worlds, their lives honored, their deaths remembered. Meaning was not something you owned, it was something you lived inside. But as the modern world moved north, something began to disappear. Not suddenly, not violently, but quietly. Language faded, rituals thinned, meaning became harder to hold. And what remains now is not absence, but distance. Wide landscapes, unbroken horizons, cold winds, arriving from Siberia with nothing to stop them. And within that vastness, something still endures. Not loudly, not completely, but enough. A culture still holding on to itself, even as the world around it moves on. Kyoto. In nature, silence is something you encounter, unexpected, uncontrolled. But in Kyoto, silence is constructed, carefully, deliberately, shaped by human hands over centuries. Hidden between narrow streets and quiet hills, temples appear almost without warning. Not to dominate the landscape, but to withdraw from it. At places like Kinkakuji, the structure does not stand apart from its surroundings. It dissolves into them. Gold, resting on water, not shining outward, but reflecting inward. The surface of the pond does not disturb the image, it completes it. Stillness becomes part of the architecture. Not something around it, but something built into it. Elsewhere, at Ginkakuji, the approach is different. Less brilliance, less reflection, more absence. Gardens shaped from stone and sand, where nothing grows, and yet everything feels alive. Patterns drawn into the ground, not for decoration, but for attention. Each line, each curve, guiding the eye, and then releasing it. There is nothing extra here, nothing to impress, nothing to hold on to. And that is the point. Because in these spaces, you are not meant to observe, you are meant to slow down, enough to notice. The placement of a single rock, the distance between two shadows, the way light settles and stays. Time does not stop here, it becomes visible. And in that visibility, you begin to understand something subtle. That silence is not the absence of sound, it is the absence of excess. Here, nothing competes, nothing demands. Everything exists exactly as it needs to. And in that balance, silence is no longer something you search for. It is something that has already been made. Sakura. For most of the year, Japan is restrained, quiet, measured, enduring. But for a brief moment, the country changes its language. Cherry blossoms. They do not arrive loudly, they appear slowly. Across cities, rivers, and mountains, as if the world is remembering color after forgetting it. Entire streets become soft. Air becomes visible. Light feels different. People gather beneath them, not to celebrate permanence, but to witness impermanence, because they already know this will not last. And that is exactly why it matters. Petals begin to fall, not in chaos, but in rhythm, floating through space like something unfinished, something already becoming memory. A single wind changes everything. And suddenly, what was full is empty again, but not lost, remembered. And in that disappearance, there is understanding. That beauty does not ask to remain, it only asks to be seen before it leaves. Across this journey, we have seen a Japan rarely shown. Not fast, not loud, not illuminated by neon, but shaped by something else. Stillness. A country of forests, of water, of stone. A place where silence is not emptiness, it is presence. The cities will continue to move, the lights will never fade, but beyond them, this world remains, waiting, unchanged. And if you ever feel lost, if the noise becomes too much, you now know there is another side. Always there, always quiet, always Japan. If this journey stayed with you, there are more places like this, more stories. Subscribe and continue the journey.